the ominous warning. Amora had never imagined her wedding day would arrive like this, amidst a whirlwind of colors, sounds, and bustling activity. As the youngest daughter of Mama Ifunanya, a woman known for her unyielding beliefs in tradition, Amora had always known her life would be shaped by the dreams and expectations of those around her. But she had hoped, just for once, she could have a quiet, simple ceremony, a day that felt like it belonged to her and Kelechi alone. Kelechi, the love of her life, was nothing like Mama Ifunanya. He was calm, humble, and shared her desire for simplicity. But Mama Ifunanya, with her towering presence and endless influence, had insisted that the wedding be nothing short of extravagant. "You will have the wedding of a queen, Amora," she said, her voice thick with authority. "It must be grand, for you are the daughter of this house. The village will remember it forever." Despite her own wishes, Amora had reluctantly agreed. She had tried to reason with her mother, but Mama Ifunanya's determination was unwavering. And so, Amora found herself in the market, walking between vibrant stalls, her hands weighed down by lists and orders. The air was thick with the smells of fresh produce and spices, and the laughter of market women echoed around her as she shopped for the perfect fabrics, jewelry, and accessories. It was there, in the center of the bustling market, that she met the old woman. The woman was hunched over, her wrinkled face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but something about her, her sharp, knowing eyes, stopped Amora in her tracks. She moved toward her, drawn by an inexplicable force. "Keep your wedding simple, or you will suffer," the old woman whispered in a hoarse voice, her words sinking into Amora's chest like a cold stone. Amora felt a shiver run down her spine. The market women nearby had paused their chatter and exchanged wary glances. Whispers floated through the air, the kind of whispers that seemed to echo from ages past, hinting at something beyond ordinary sight. "They say mad people sometimes see beyond what we do," one of the women muttered, her voice trembling. Mama Ifunanya, hearing the commotion, hurried over, dismissing the old woman with a wave of her hand. "Nonsense," she said, her voice laced with irritation. "She's just a rambling old fool. Don't mind her, Amora." But Amora couldn't shake the feeling that the woman's warning held weight. Her thoughts swirled with doubt, torn between the love she felt for Kelechi and the weight of her mother's expectations. Was she making a mistake? Should she stand up to Mama Ifunanya, or was it too late to change course? That night, as Amora lay in bed, her mind a storm of emotions, a strange dream overtook her. In the darkness, she saw the old woman again. She stood in the rain, her face pale, and her lips moved as though whispering words Amora could not understand. The woman's eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment, Amora saw something deep within them, a warning, a plea, an unknown sorrow. Amora awoke with a start, her heart pounding. The dream lingered, its meaning elusive, like a shadow just beyond her grasp. Was it just a nightmare? Or was it a sign, a wedding wrapped in shadows? The day of Amora's wedding dawned bright and full of promise, a celebration of love, tradition, and the joining of two souls. The village was alive with the sounds of joy. Traditional drummers beat their rhythm while dancers swirled in colorful attire, their movements a blur of grace and energy. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meats, freshly baked bread, and fragrant herbs, and the feasting seemed endless. It was everything Mama Ifunanya had dreamed of and more. Amora, dressed in an elaborate gown of deep red and gold, smiled through the festivities, her heart heavy with unease. She had tried to push the strange feelings aside, to embrace the celebration for Kelechi's sake. But in every smile, every laugh, there was an undercurrent of something dark, something she couldn't fully understand. As Amora stood by the altar, receiving the blessings of family and friends, her grandmother, Mama Uju, approached her. The elderly woman was a towering figure in Amora's life, a woman of few words, but with eyes that seemed to see everything. Her weathered hands reached out, pulling Amora into a long, unexpected hug. "You are a beautiful bride," Mama Uju murmured, her voice thick with emotion. But then, just as Amora pulled back, Mama Uju's hands lingered, pressing briefly against her stomach. A chill ran through Amora's body, and for a fleeting moment, she felt an icy weight settle deep within her. She couldn't explain why, but the touch unsettled her, leaving her with a strange sense of foreboding. Her grandmother's eyes met hers, locking onto Amora with an intensity that made her heart race. "You are bound by more than love, my child," Mama Uju said cryptically, her tone soft but urgent. "But be careful where you step, for shadows often follow us, even on the brightest days." Before Amora could respond, Mama Uju was gone, swallowed by the crowd of celebrants. Amora stood there, bewildered, her mind racing, trying to understand the cryptic words. Later, as the evening progressed, the guests gathered around to unwrap the gifts: beautiful fabrics, carved wooden figures, baskets of food, and sparkling jewelry. Laughter echoed across the courtyard as Amora and Kelechi took turns opening each parcel. But when Amora's fingers touched the next bundle, something strange happened. Inside, wrapped in layers of soft cloth, was a torn piece of fabric, old and frayed. Amora frowned as she unwrapped it, her fingers brushing against the rough edges. But it wasn't just any cloth. It was wrapped in a string of ancient cowrie shells, an ominous symbol of the past. The room grew still, a tension creeping in. Amora's eyes widened. "That's not a gift," someone murmured from the crowd. Kelechi's face darkened as he looked at the cloth. "We should burn it. Immediately." But before anyone could respond, Mama Ifinanya intervened, her voice sharp and dismissive. "It's just a prank, a joke from the old days," she said, waving the concern away as if it were nothing more than a trivial matter. "Ignore it." But Amora couldn't. The sight of the torn cloth, the ancient cowrie shells, stirred something deep within her. She had heard stories from the elders, whispered warnings about the dangers of omens and signs. Was this one of them? That night, after the festivities had ended and the village had settled into the quiet of the evening, Amora lay in bed, unable to shake the unease that clung to her. The dreams came quickly, as though waiting for her to close her eyes. In the darkness, she saw Mama Uju again. The old woman stood at the edge of a vast, empty space, her laughter echoing in the silence. It wasn't a happy laugh, it was hollow, empty, full of malice. And then, in the shadows, Mama Uju's voice floated to her, soft but chilling. "This marriage will bring you nothing but pain," the words echoed in Amora's mind, a prophecy that burned into her consciousness. "The shadows have found you, and they will never leave." Amora awoke with a gasp, her heart racing. The dream felt so real, the words so clear. She could still hear her grandmother's laughter, a sound that sent a cold shiver through her soul. What had she stepped into? Was this truly her fate, or was it simply her imagination, fed by old warnings and fears? The darkness was closing in, and Amora couldn't escape it. The curse awakens. The weeks following Amora's wedding were supposed to be filled with happiness and anticipation, the start of a new chapter in her life with Kelechi. But instead, an unsettling sense of dread hung over them, one they couldn't shake. What was meant to be a season of joy quickly became a time of strange misfortune and suffering. At first, it was small things. Amora woke up one morning with a deep sense of exhaustion, a weariness that wouldn't fade no matter how long she slept. Then, her health took a turn for the worse. She lost weight rapidly, her skin became pale and sallow, and a constant weakness seeped into her bones. Her once vibrant energy was now drained, leaving her confined to their bed for days on end, unable to explain the sudden decline in her health. Kelechi, too, began to feel the weight of their misfortune. His business, which had once been thriving, suddenly started facing inexplicable financial losses. Orders were cancelled, investments turned sour, and clients pulled away for no apparent reason. His once successful ventures were crumbling, leaving him desperate and confused. He worked long hours to try and salvage his business, but no matter what he did, things only worsened. Their home, once a sanctuary of love, became a battleground. Arguments became frequent, the air thick with tension. Their once gentle words were replaced by sharp, angry exchanges. Amora's illness weighed heavily on both of them, and Kelechi's stress only fueled the fire. Tears stained Amora's pillow each night as she lay awake, wondering what had happened to their peaceful life. Amora tried everything to heal herself, medicine, rest, and even specialties, but nothing seemed to work. The illness remained stubborn, as if something dark was controlling her body from within. Desperate, she sought out a local herbalist, an old woman known for her knowledge of the ancient ways. The herbalist was quiet as Amora explained her troubles, listening intently, her eyes narrowing with concern. When Amora finished, the herbalist's voice was grave. "You are under a curse," she said softly, her hands trembling as they wrapped around a bundle of herbs. "This is no ordinary illness. It is a deep curse, one that ties itself to your soul." Amora's heart skipped a beat. A curse. She didn't know what to make of it. But the herbalist's tone left no room for doubt. "Do you recall," the herbalist asked, her voice tinged with caution, "if any elderly relative touched your stomach on your wedding day?" Amora's breath caught in her throat. The memory surged back, Mama Uju's strange embrace, the unsettling touch of her hands against Amora's stomach. The cold shiver that had run down her spine when her grandmother whispered words that made no sense. It had all come flooding back now, and with it, the terrible realization that something had been set in motion that day. "I remember," Amora whispered, her voice trembling. "My grandmother, she touched my stomach, and then she said something. I couldn't understand it at the time." The herbalist nodded slowly, her eyes darkening with knowledge. "Your grandmother's touch was not a blessing. It was a binding, a curse that has been passed down through generations. She warned you in her own way, though you did not understand. Now, the curse is awakened, and it will take everything from you if not dealt with." Amora's heart raced. She had heard stories of curses in her village, old, forgotten things that haunted families and destroyed lives, but she had never believed them. She had thought they were just tales, woven to scare children. Now, facing the herbalist's somber gaze, she realized that the stories were real. "How do we break it?" Amora asked, her voice barely a whisper, desperation creeping into her words. The herbalist hesitated for a moment, her wrinkled hands clenching. "There are ways to fight this curse, but it requires great sacrifice and strength. You will need to seek spiritual guidance, to go deeper into the old ways, and find the root of the curse. If you do not, it will consume you both, mind, body, and soul." Amora and Kelechi sat together that evening, their faces drawn and pale from the weight of the herbalist's words. The atmosphere in their home had never felt heavier. How had things come to this? The life they had dreamed of, the love they had shared, was slipping through their fingers like sand. They knew they had to act before it was too late. They couldn't let the curse take everything from them. And so, with heavy hearts and a sense of resolve, Amora and Kelechi decided to seek spiritual guidance, hoping that someone, anyone, could help them undo what had been done. But as they prepared for the journey ahead, the shadows continued to watch, waiting. And Amora couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still to come, secrets of the past. Amora and Kelechi knew they couldn't wait any longer. The curse, with its relentless grip on their lives, seemed to tighten with each passing day. Their once joyful home was now a place of suffering, and Amora felt as though her world was falling apart. They needed answers, and they needed them quickly. With no other options left, they traveled to seek the wisdom of a prophetess known for her deep connection to the spiritual world. She lived in a small, secluded hut on the edge of the village, surrounded by fragrant herbs and thick trees that seemed to pulse with energy. The air was heavy with incense as Amora and Kelechi entered, hoping that this encounter would give them the answers they so desperately sought. The prophetess, an older woman with a calm and knowing presence, welcomed them into her home. She sat them down and began to speak, her voice low and measured. "Your suffering is not by chance," she said. "It has been set in motion by the jealousy of someone close to you. Someone in your family could not bear to see your joy, your happiness, and so they cursed your union." Amora's breath caught in her chest. The weight of the words hung heavy in the room. "Who?" she asked, the question escaping her lips before she could stop it. "Who would do such a thing?" The prophetess's eyes glowed with ancient knowledge as she spoke. "You must look within your family, for the answer lies there. The one who touched you, who bound your soul to this curse, is someone who knew the power of jealousy and bitterness." Amora's thoughts turned back to that moment on her wedding day, to the touch of Mama Uju's hands on her stomach. The coldness she had felt in her grandmother's embrace had never left her. Could it be? Could her own grandmother be the one who had cast this dark spell upon her? The prophetess continued, her voice soft but firm. "You must fast for 7 days to purify your soul and prepare for what is to come. Only then can you confront the one who has cursed you. Your strength must come from within, for this journey will not be easy." Amora felt a surge of determination. She had endured so much already, but if there was a chance to break the curse and save her family, she would do whatever it took. Kelechi, though worried, stood by her side. They knew the path ahead would be difficult, but it was the only choice they had left. As Amora prepared for the fast, Kelechi's bad luck continued to spiral. In the days that followed, he lost his job at the local business. The work he had once been so proud of slipped away like water through his fingers. Their savings, which they had carefully built over the years, mysteriously disappeared from their accounts, leaving them penniless and desperate. It felt as though the world was collapsing around them. But the misfortune didn't stop there. Their newborn son, Chijioke, who had once been a source of joy and light in their lives, began having terrifying seizures. His small body shook violently, and his cries echoed through the night, filled with a fear that seemed unnatural for a baby so young. He also began to have nightmares, thrashing in his crib and whispering strange, unintelligible words in his sleep. The sight of their son suffering broke Amora's heart. She couldn't understand what was happening, but everything, the curse, the sickness, the misfortune, seemed to be tied together, a tangled web from which they couldn't escape. Mama Ifunanya, who had been caught up in the whirlwind of wedding plans, began to realize that something was terribly wrong. She watched as her daughter's health deteriorated, her son grew sick, and Kelechi's fortunes crumbled. Her pride in the grand wedding was replaced by regret, and she started questioning the choices she had made. One evening, as Amora lay in bed after a long day of fasting, she could feel the weight of the curse pressing down on her. Her body was weak, but her mind was clear. It was time. She knew she had to confront her grandmother, the one who had set all of this in motion, and demand the truth. The 7th day of the fast came, and Amora, though weakened, was determined. She had prepared herself spiritually for the confrontation, gathering every ounce of strength she could muster. She and Kelechi made their way to Mama Uju's home, the familiar path now heavy with dread. When they arrived, Mama Uju sat in the corner of her small house, her gnarled hands folded in her lap. Her piercing eyes met Amora's, and for the first time, Amora saw something other than the usual stoic indifference in them. There was fear. And perhaps, even guilt. "Grandmother," Amora said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I need to know the truth. What have you done to me? To our family?" Mama Uju's lips trembled, but she did not speak. Amora stepped closer, her voice rising, driven by years of unanswered questions. Why did you curse my wedding? Why did you bring this darkness upon us? You touched my stomach that day. You knew what it would mean. What have you done? The old woman finally spoke, her voice a hoarse whisper. I did not want to. But your happiness threatened me. I could not bear to see you find joy, Amora. My jealousy, my anger at being forgotten, this is what I cast upon you. I did not know how powerful it would be, but now it has taken root, and I cannot undo it. Amora stood frozen, her heart shattering as the truth finally came to light. The curse, the suffering, it was all born from her grandmother's jealousy, her bitterness that had festered for years. Tears welled in Amora's eyes as she looked at her grandmother. Why, Mama Uju? Why did you do this to me? The old woman bowed her head, a single tear sliding down her cheek. I was wrong, my child. I was wrong. But now, there is no turning back. Amora's soul burned with a mixture of sorrow and rage. She had trusted Mama Uju, but now the woman who had raised her, who had guided her through so much, had torn their lives apart. The truth was more painful than she could have imagined. But she would not give up. Not now, not when her family's future hung in the balance. It was time to fight back, to undo the curse that had stolen so much from them. And she would do whatever it took to reclaim the peace and love that had been taken from her. The grandmother's confession. Amora sat beside her grandmother's bedside, the weight of the past few weeks pressing heavily upon her heart. Mama Uju, once a formidable figure in their family, was now frail and weakened, her once sharp eyes clouded with regret. The strong, proud woman who had carried so much of their family's history was now a shell of her former self, bedridden and fragile, burdened by the truth she had kept hidden for so long. The room was thick with silence, save for the occasional rustle of the bed linens and the sound of shallow breaths. Amora's heart ached as she watched the woman who had raised her, the woman she had once looked up to, now diminished by the weight of her own actions. Mama Uju's hands trembled as she reached out, her voice hoarse but filled with a deep sorrow. Amora, she whispered, I have sinned, and it is time I tell you the truth. Amora's breath caught in her throat. She had waited so long for this moment, yet nothing could prepare her for what was to come. She nodded, her eyes filled with both pain and compassion. Grandmother, I'm listening. Tell me everything. Mama Uju closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I was once young and full of hope, just like you. But life has a way of tearing you apart when you least expect it. Your grandfather, the man I loved more than anything, abandoned me when I needed him most. He left for another woman, a younger woman who promised him everything I could not. Her voice trembled as she spoke, a deep, unhealed wound opening in her heart. I had given him my everything, my love, my trust, my spirit, and he shattered it. After he left, I was left with nothing but bitterness, a hollow feeling that gnawed at me every day. The pain of being rejected by the one I thought would always stand by me consumed me. Amora listened in silence, her heart heavy with understanding, but also with sorrow. She had never known the depth of her grandmother's pain, the long years of bitterness that had festered in her soul. But she could feel it now, the anger, the heartbreak, and the overwhelming weight of rejection that had shaped her grandmother's life. When I saw you, Amora, so full of life and happiness, Mama Uju continued, her voice breaking, I couldn't bear it. Your joy reminded me of everything I had lost. You were so beautiful, so innocent. And I couldn't stand it. I could not bear to see you so happy, knowing that I would never have that again. I placed the curse on you, on your wedding, because I wanted to take away that happiness, to make you feel the same loneliness I had felt all those years. I wanted you to suffer as I had suffered. Amora felt a coldness wash over her, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was the moment of truth. This was the moment when everything could change. Despite the pain, despite the betrayal, she knew what she had to do. Mama Uju continued, her voice now softer, almost pleading. I should have never done it. I see that now. I see what my jealousy has cost you, Amora. But it is too late for me. I have no strength left to undo what I've done. I am sorry. Amora's eyes welled with tears. The depth of her grandmother's remorse was clear, but so was the immense pain Amora had endured because of that curse. She had been betrayed by the one person she had loved and trusted most. And yet, she knew that forgiveness was the only way forward, the only way to break the cycle of bitterness that had haunted her family for so long. Grandmother, Amora whispered, her voice breaking with emotion, I forgive you. I understand your pain. And I forgive you. But I won't let bitterness rule my life. I won't let it take away my happiness or my family's happiness anymore. You taught me to love, to forgive, and now I will do that even in this. I won't carry your pain with me. I will release it. Mama Uju's face softened, her eyes searching Amora's face as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Slowly, a small, peaceful smile crossed her lips, and for the first time in years, there was a sense of peace in her expression. Thank you, Mama Uju whispered, her voice barely audible, thank you for freeing me, my child. Amora closed her eyes and bowed her head, offering a prayer for her grandmother. In that moment, she felt the weight of the curse lift from her heart. It was as if the very air in the room had changed, lighter, calmer, filled with the hope of new beginnings. As Amora whispered her final prayer, a deep breath escaped Mama Uju's chest, a sigh that seemed to carry away all the years of pain and regret. Slowly, her eyes closed, and a peaceful stillness settled over her frail form. She passed away quietly in her sleep, a soft smile still lingering on her lips, as if she had found the peace she had been searching for all her life. In the days that followed, something miraculous happened. Chijioke, their newborn son who had been plagued by seizures and nightmares, suddenly began to improve. His cries became less frequent, and his health gradually returned. The shadows that had haunted him seemed to disappear, as if they had never been there at all. And then, in a twist of fate, Kelechi received an unexpected job offer, a miracle after the long string of misfortunes that had plagued him. The offer came from a prestigious company that had heard of his skills and was eager to have him on their team. The opportunity was more than he had ever hoped for, and it seemed like the universe was finally aligning in their favor once again. Amora and Kelechi stood together, their hands intertwined, watching as their family healed. The curse that had haunted them for so long had been broken, and in its place, there was hope, the hope that had been rekindled through love, forgiveness, and the strength to let go of the past. Their journey was far from over, but now, they knew that no darkness could ever again overshadow their lives. The light of love would always guide them, and together, they would face whatever came next. The power of forgiveness. As the weeks passed, a newfound sense of peace began to settle in Amora and Kelechi's home. The heavy cloud of misfortune that had loomed over them for so long slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a warmth that seemed to fill every corner of their lives. Chijioke, once fragile and ill, blossomed with health. His laughter echoed through the house, a sound so pure and joyful it was like music to their ears. The curse that had once ravaged their family had been broken, and in its place was a renewed sense of hope. Kelechi's job offer turned into a career change that brought him not only financial stability but also a deep sense of fulfillment. His work was now aligned with his passions, and it was clear to both of them that their lives were being redirected towards something brighter. What had once felt like a struggle for survival now felt like a path to prosperity and peace. Amora, too, found a new sense of strength within herself. Her health returned, and with it came a deep understanding of the power of forgiveness. As she watched her son grow stronger each day, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had learned that jealousy and resentment could be powerful forces, ones that could wreak havoc on even the most loving of relationships. But she also learned that love and forgiveness were strong enough to heal even the deepest wounds. One evening, as Amora and Kelechi sat together on their porch, watching the sun set over the village, Amora made a vow to herself and to her family. "I will raise Chijioke with love," she said softly, her voice steady with conviction. "He will never know the bitterness that tried to take root in our family. I will teach him to love freely and forgive without hesitation. No curses, no bitterness. Just love." Kelechi smiled, his hand gently resting on hers. "And we'll raise him in peace, Amora. The way we were always meant to." In the days that followed, Amora and Kelechi took the time to reflect on the lessons they had learned. Mama Ifunanya, who had watched the transformations in her daughter's life, began to feel the weight of her own actions. She approached Amora one afternoon, her eyes filled with regret. "I have wronged you, my daughter," Mama Ifunanya said, her voice trembling. "I forced you into the extravagant wedding, and I didn't see how much it hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong. I see now that it was my pride that almost destroyed your happiness, that almost destroyed our family. I am so sorry." Amora looked at her mother, her heart softening. She had already forgiven her, but hearing her mother's apology brought a sense of closure. "I understand, Mama," Amora replied, her voice filled with love. "We both acted out of love and the desire to do what was right. But we've learned, haven't we? That love and happiness can't be forced." It was then that Amora and Kelechi decided to renew their vows, but this time, in a way that truly reflected the love they had built together, a simple, intimate ceremony surrounded by only the closest of friends and family. No grand decorations, no extravagant displays, just the two of them, their love, and their commitment to each other. It was a ceremony filled with joy, peace, and the promise of a future built on love, forgiveness, and understanding. As Amora stood beside Kelechi, holding his hands in hers, she realized that the wedding she had always dreamed of wasn't about grandeur or impressing others. It was about two souls coming together in love and making a vow to always support one another, no matter what life threw their way. And so, they stood there, pledging their hearts to each other once again, this time free from the weight of the past. The village, once full of gossip and whispers, now watched as Amora and Kelechi began a new chapter, one where love reigned and curses had no place. The story ended with a powerful lesson for all who had witnessed their journey: not all traditions must be followed. Some things, like love and happiness, should never be forced or cursed. Amora and Kelechi's love was proof of that truth, an enduring testament to the power of forgiveness, the strength of the human heart, and the belief that no matter the darkness that may surround us, love will always find a way to shine through.